thank you very much for the very warm welcome. Good afternoon, and you're very welcome to the opening of the academic year 2023-2024 here at the Eindhoven University of Technology. A very warm welcome to everybody here in the Blauwe Zaal, and also to everyone else who happens to be watching this online, wherever you are. And for those who are Irish in the room or Irish at home watching, Fáilte Rómh. I'm Barry Fitzgerald, Science Communicator here at TUE and host for this afternoon's ceremony. Now, today's theme relates to creating new earning power in Europe through investment in the tech needed for our major societal transitions. So what's today's program going to be like? Well, we have a lot in store for you. We have notable speakers. We have fantastic guests who will speak about our theme from their own unique viewpoints, who are all sitting in the front row. We also have two panel discussions. We're spoiling you in terms of chat here. We have video entertainment. We have a very interesting item that will be presented to the university later on. It's actually on stage. So if you can see it, then spoiling the whole surprise, but it is there. And finally, of course, we will conclude with a speech from our Rector Magnificus, Sylvia Lenhart, who is in front of me, and we will officially open and launch the academic year here today. Before I continue, I would invite everyone to please put your mobile devices on mute and make sure they are on mute for the remainder of the event. Right, let's get started. Well, to kick things off, I'd like to introduce the President of the Executive Board at TUE, and that is Robert Jan Smits.
Thank you very much, Barry, for the kind introduction. And welcome to all of you for the opening of the academic year here at the Eindhoven University of Technology. Welcome to the ones who are physically here with us this afternoon and the ones who are online, thanks to the cooperation with Science Business. A special word of welcome, of course, to our students, to our staff, our researchers, to our alumni, I saw many of them present here this afternoon, of course to our friends and guests from the Brainport region, and last but not least, to our speakers and panelists. But there is one person I would like to single out to welcome, and that's of course our mayor, Jeroen Dijsselbloem, who is here for the first time. Give him a big round of applause, if you could stand up, right? We're also very fortunate to have the former mayor, John Jortsma, with us. So John, also to you, welcome here at this ceremony. And it shows that mayors, once they leave, stay big friends of the university. We have, as Barry already mentioned, a fantastic program this afternoon with a great topic about the earning power, the earning capability of Europe and also the Netherlands, with all the legislation which is coming our way, the challenges we are facing, the climate transition, the energy transition. Many people ask the question, what will be our earning power of the future? And that's exactly what the speakers and panelists will going to talk about. And I think with the names of the speakers you've seen in the panel, it's going to be a fantastic program. So once again, enjoy it. Welcome here to the Blauwe Zaal. And over to you, Barry.
Thank you very much to President of the Executive Board, Robert Jan Smits, for the introduction. So let's get things started with our very first speaker. He is until recently the head of cabinet to Executive Vice President Frans Timmermans. Please, everybody in the room, give a warm welcome to Diederik Samsom.
Thank you and welcome everyone. Thanks Robert Jan for inviting me and also for spicing up my introduction. I will come back to that in a minute. Because in all honesty, when I accepted the invitation, I thought that I could do this on autopilot. Here's an engineer talking in the temple of technology. That's the summum of preaching to the choir. So I would go, technology is great, it can solve all problems, it can do wonders, let's go for it. So you can imagine my surprise when I opened my favorite morning newspaper, De Telegraaf, on the 24th of August, and there it was, the headline, "The energy transition is going too fast," featuring a very nice, I must give it to you, very nice picture of Robert-Jan Smits next to it. So here we were. Here's the boss of the University of Technology arguing that the energy transition is going too fast, or is going too fast and should actually slow down. You can imagine my surprise. And interestingly enough, in that same interview, he predicted that a guy called Diederik Samsom would, for a fully 100%, disagree with him. Well, you bet I do. So here we go. Well, first of all, our different political backgrounds might explain the difference of opinion, since this is actually the classical rift between conservatives and progressives. The conservatives who argue that change, and especially rapid change, causes an enormous amount of problems, while progressives argue that change, and preferably rapid change, is needed to solve exactly the same problems. In this case, the energy transition is the change, and the problems that we faced are deindustrialization, high energy prices. So conservatives say, okay, slow down because the transition is causing all of that, while progressives argue that you should go full steam ahead in order to solve them. In all honesty, in most of these discussions, there's no absolute right and wrong in the discussion between conservatives and progressives, and that's why in Europe especially we've landed on this great consensus between conservatives and progressives that you could call, let's say, stable progress, gradual progress. It brought us the enormous prosperity and wealth that we have in this continent. But with the energy transition, it's different. There's an external imperative. We don't have the choice between the slow progress or even slowing down. We need to go fast forward. We can't afford the luxury of landing on that spectacular consensus that we have developed in the past centuries. The existential imperative is climate change. Well, you've all seen what happened this summer, but between all of that, between the forest fires, the floods, the extreme weather events, and the enormous heat, there is one graph that scientists all over the world are looking at right now because they can't understand and they can't believe what they see. It's the temperature of the water in the North Atlantic Ocean, and it's going at a speed upwards that is mind-boggling and scary. We are reaching pivotal points in our planetary climate system. We simply cannot afford to slow down. The good part of the story is we don't have to. We can accelerate the energy transition. And that's because the last decade, the history of a spectacular technology development has been written and is still being written up to today and in the next years. What scientists and engineers have done with green technology in the last 10 years is nothing less than a revolution. If you look at what solar, wind, batteries, electrolyzers are doing right now, you can't believe what you're seeing. But it's happening. And scientists all over the world, and especially here in Eindhoven, are working day and night and adding new technologies and pushing the cost curves of those technologies even further down. So in all irony, the boss of the University of Technology in Eindhoven is arguing for a slowdown, while that same university is leading the way in the acceleration of the energy transition. So, can we just lean back and watch the ideal world to unfold upon us? No, we can't. Because obviously Smits is right in a few of his worries. Every big transition creates a lot of tension in society, and there's two I want to single out for my introduction. One is indeed the threat of deindustrialization. You're right, Robert-Jan. That is a threat that is upon Europe. But it's counterintuitive to what you argue in terms of the energy transition being the cause. It's because the other blocs in the world, the other geopolitical powers in the world, China and the US, are accelerating their transition and threatening our industry. Because of them outcompeting us in new technologies, such as solar, such as wind, such as batteries, such as electrical cars, such as electrolyzers. If you look at what China and the US are doing at the moment, we shouldn't slow down. We should speed up. We should put more effort on the table in order to keep our wealth and our industry where it belongs here in Europe. And we can. We can. If you add all the subsidies that 27 countries and one European Commission hand out to companies in Europe, we blow the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, we blow it out of the water with the amount of money. But we do it in 27 parts, with 27 regulations, and 27 conditions, and 27 timeframes, and 27 governance institutions. If we want to compete with a country the size of a continent, China, and companies the size of a continent in the US, we need to operate as a continent, not as 27 single countries. Because whatever that single country, even Germany, will do, it's pissing in the wind compared to what a continent can accomplish. Europe should operate here, and then we can save our industrialization. The second big problem is not the technology challenge that we have. As I said, I'm confident, and looking at all of you, I'm even more confident that we will develop the technologies. It's not the financial, although it's a bit more tight than it was a few years ago. The big challenge that we have to introduce this fast transition and to speed up the transition is a social one. Every transition in society has a Darwinistic nature. It always ends up with more money and more power in the hands of less people. That was true for the first industrial revolution, for the second, the third, and now again. In the first, the second, and the third industrial revolution, we repaired that damage afterwards using the enormous leap in wealth because of that industrial revolution afterwards, and we created sort of a fair society. And we have a long way to go, but okay, Europe is quite a fair society. And we can be proud of that. But this fourth industrial revolution is different. First of all, it will not make us 3 times as rich as we were, so we don't have that wealth to redistribute. Second, we have a population that is, rightfully so, not willing to wait for 20 years in order for the benefits to land up on their doorsteps. And third, this transition goes right at the heart of every life. The social transition, the social aspects of this are way beyond what we have right now, and we are just scratching the surface of solving it. We know how to redistribute income. We know how to redistribute wealth. But this is not about income and wealth. This is about more than that. This is about opportunity in life. This is about optimism. This is about hope. So how do you distribute opportunity, optimism, and hope? And that will be my plea to the University of Eindhoven, and actually all engineers in the world. Reach out to your partners of social science. Because the combination of technological revolution and social revolution is the only thing that can solve this conundrum of a fast change that needs to happen in a society that actually doesn't want to change that fast. We need your technology, we need your brains, we need all of the fancy solutions that you see on the screen here, but most of all, we need ideas on how to deploy them into society faster than we did so far. So yes, Robert-Jan, we should speed up, we can't afford to slow down, and if this university reaches out to the rest of the Netherlands and universities reach out to each other, we actually can do this.
Thank you very much, Diederik. Nice change of direction. Can I ask you to take the first seat in this role. Thank you very much. A round of applause, please, once more for Diederik Samsom. And we will hear again from Diederik, because I have some questions for you after we've heard from our second and third speaker. Let's move swiftly on to speaker number 2. She is the Chief Economist and Global Head of Research at ING Group. Please welcome Marieke Blom to the stage.
Well, good afternoon. It's the start of an academic year, so I guess that deserves a motivational speech, right? And the question is, what motivates you to get going? Is it fear or is it confidence? I would say usually a blend of the two, but I'm going to focus, like Diederik, on the confidence. The question I got was, is it economically viable to make the green transition using all the technologies that the Netherlands has? Can we do it as an economy? And my question is, yes, we can do it as an economy. We are way beyond the planetary boundaries. And many economic estimates show that the cost of avoiding climate change are in fact lower than the cost of making climate change happen. So if you ask me, is it doable from an economic perspective, I tell you there's in fact a business case for getting the transition going. It's more attractive economically to do it. An interesting fact, it turns out that 73% of Europeans agree with this statement. So great, I'm an economist and we have a business case. Okay, next step. Do we then go for degrowth or do we go for green growth? That's kind of the question that I'm getting now. And speaking here in Eindhoven, of course, I must emphasize that technology can do an awful lot. And solar power and wind power, they're great examples of everything that technology can do. So green growth? Well, yes, but to just rely on technology would be naive. Why is that the case? First of all these technologies didn't just sort of evolve out of themselves, they evolved because of a lot of government interventions, especially subsidies. So that's the first thing that we still need in order to get green growth. Secondly, once we have these innovations, we have to think about rebound effects. So if you think about LED lights, for example, they're much more energy efficient, but now we light up an entire cathedral using LED lights. So we have to think about that as well. And it means that my next conviction is that, yes, the green transition is cheaper than climate change, but also there's massive government intervention needed in order to make it work. We can't just leave it to the market. Okay, interventions then. Well, next question. This causes winners, but also losers. Team Green Growth, that will say, okay, let's grow, so we can compensate the losers, and thus we'll get public support. Here, I've changed my mind. I used to agree. But growth nor affluence are sufficient to get public support for the transition. Why not? Look at, for example, how slow the banning of combustion engines is happening in Europe. Look at the backlash against ESG in the US. Look at the backlash against nitrogen in the Netherlands. You can see that even in affluent societies, you can have these backlashes. And why is this happening? Well, first, people prefer the status quo. People don't like change. Secondly, a loss is a loss even if it's relative. And thirdly, the losses are often concentrated amongst a couple of corporates and their workers, for example, and those people are very well aware of their losses, whereas the wins are spread out quite thinly over a large group of people who aren't aware that they are the winners. So economists, myself included, have been naive in saying just promote growth and give the right incentives. So conviction number 3 I have is support for the interventions is an important hurdle even in affluent societies. So let me look at the hurdles with 2 lenses, the producer side and the consumer side of the economy. Producers, that's corporates, that's workers, and they will point to the risks of the transition for their industries, for their workers, like they did with the banning of the combustion engine in Europe, and this leads to delays. My advice to Dutch politicians is to be confident. Conviction number 4, the production side of our economy is very capable of changing, especially now. Over, John. My proof. Firstly, we dealt with transitions before. We dealt with the loss of textiles, with the coal mines, or with the end of shipping. We, as a country, were well ahead in the adoption of digitization. If you look at the share of energy-intensive industries in our economy, it went from about 15% in 95 to about 10% in 2020, and the Dutch economy was faster in making that transition than other countries, and still our economy performed better than the European average. So, I think we can do it from that perspective. And why? We benefited from structural strengths like physical, digital infrastructure, from educational levels and institutions like social security. For workers, we have a very flexible labor market here in the Netherlands. Transitions are frequent, this has increased over time, and working from home will make it even easier to switch jobs, for example, between regions. Labor markets will remain tight because of aging, and we've retrained people before. For example, getting people from a lower education to a higher education, we made a huge shift in about 50 years. And now we can learn via digital tools, so that will make it easier. And lastly, green solutions are often quite labor intensive, meaning that in previous transitions, the labor market and mass unemployment was a big concern, and this doesn't have to be so to the same extent in this transition. So that's the production side of the economy, right? Okay, but still politicians may be inclined to focus on protecting the energy-intensive industries that we now have. And of course, these industries are a part of our comparative economic strengths. But that should not leave the discussion only to the current industries. In protecting what we have today lies a lack of imagination about what may come tomorrow. 30 years ago, Dutch politicians would not have dared to dream about the current strength of the Eindhoven region and a company like ASML today. So for the production side of the economy, our government should ensure fantastic economic infrastructures, including education, and rely on corporates and workers' ability to change. What about consumers? The Dutch public agrees. Climate change should be tackled, but there's widespread fear it will come at the expense of lower incomes. This risk, I believe, is much smaller than what people believe. Firstly, people forget the positives. Examples: EVs, electric vehicles, will have a lower cost of ownership than combustion engines. Second, LED lights, I just mentioned them, are cheaper than traditional light bulbs. Solar power will limit the electricity bill. So firstly, there is economic gain too. Secondly, people don't realize there are ample possibilities to mitigate negative income effects. So the heating bill, for example, is relatively costly for lower income households. They mostly live in rental homes. What can we do? Well, if you simply make sure that no one can rent out an energy inefficient home, of course you're making life easier for lower income households. If people own a home, I would say use ample and easy to use subsidies to make it worth the while of a homeowner to insulate. And this embracing of subsidies, which I would say should be, again, ample, generous, and easy to use, is kind of new for me as an economist, because I used to say I prefer very efficient incentives like carbon pricing. Subsidies will have to be paid for by higher taxes. However, research shows that if you want to get support for the transition going, then of course anything that has to do with higher costs is a showstopper, whereas norms and subsidies do in fact help the support. So, conviction number 5. Economically inefficient subsidies are necessary to get the transition going. Conclusion? Well, the green transition is economically beneficial. Governments must intervene strongly in markets. Support for interventions is an important hurdle, but where it comes to the Dutch corporates and workers, they can deal with the change if we ensure that there's a great economic infrastructure. Low households can even benefit, where necessary, with norms or with subsidies. From an economic perspective, the Netherlands can and should embrace the transition. Please help me to spread that confidence in society and to you as engineers of the future. My trust in this transition also means that I trust in you developing these energy and efficient technologies. So please get that going as fast as you can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marieke. We'll be speaking again after we've heard from our third speaker, and I'll move swiftly on again to our third guest speaker. He is CEO of ASML. Please welcome Peter Wennink to the stage.
Thank you, Barry. Robert Jan told me when we were on the stairs that my 8 minutes was down to 6. And I clocked these guys, so I'm probably down to 3. But that's okay. So, yeah, it's actually 2. No, when I was asked to give this keynote speech, it was about the earning power of the Netherlands and Europe. And we've talked a lot about the energy transition and climate change, but in my mind, there are more challenges, societal transitions ongoing that go further than just climate change. You can think about the digitalization, which will have a profound effect on society, an aging population. In other words, there are these big systemic changes ongoing, and I'm concerned. And I'm concerned that when we look at the earnings power of Europe and the Netherlands, that we are at the risk of falling behind. And I made a couple of notes. We have to change. I think we have to collectively think about a new way of how we're going to address these issues. It is not business as usual. It won't get us there. I think when you think about these changes, what needs to be done, what I lack and what I don't see is a very clear vision to a society and to people, and that we approach these issues in a very systemic way. Not in point solutions. We have many point solutions, but they're not connected. We need that. We also need to take risk. More risk than we're used to. Because we have a welfare state that's pretty comfortable. But we need to take risk if we want to be part of that change. And in order to do that, we need to collaborate. And we need to be creative. And it's not only about companies or academia or governments. It is something we need to do together, because if you look at the world, and if you look at the big transitions, then things are moving faster in other parts of the world. And I think Diederik said it, the United States is leading the digital revolution with big tech, probably a bit too far away to catch up. And East Asia leads in renewable energy. East Asia leads in electric vehicles, leads in battery technology, materials. And basically, I think if you lead in those transitions, and we talk about the earnings power, guess what? In 10, 20 years' time, what will you buy? You'll buy a Chinese car, you'll buy Japanese materials, because that's what they are better at. Now, having said that, is that a problem? Yes, it's a big problem. But is there anything we can do against this? Yes, we can. Because I think we have world-class academia and we have still world-class companies. And what we need is this collaboration between these companies and the academia and the government that is facilitating. Yes, we need subsidies, but I think it's more important. Money will help, but it's more about regulation. It is more about legislation. It's about incentives, but also it's creating platforms where collaboration between industry, academia, and governments is actually promoted. Now, what can governments do, or what should they do different? One, they should focus on a long-term vision, which is extremely important. That we're at a disadvantage. Politics and governments, especially politics, are fragmented. And we're looking at point solutions because it actually flows easily in the media. There is no long-term vision. There is no long-term focus I was in Korea a couple of weeks ago, and the Korean president took 1 hour of his time to talk to me, during my vacation, by the way, to talk about what is important for Korea. And he had 1 hour that he said Korea will be the #1 semiconductor ecosystem on the planet because semiconductors are going to be the cornerstone of all these innovations. And then he started to talk about ASML. It was the president of Korea that gave me a complete overview of the product portfolio of our company. Now, try to imagine that our prime minister would do that. It doesn't happen. I mean, it's focus. So I think focus is extremely important, and I think also when we want to work together, it's not only the collaboration between academia and industry and governments, but also inside the government. We need to have interdepartmental focus. In my experience in working with the government, departments are too siloed, so we need to bring it all together. And also industry has a task. Industry is complacent. You know? Industry is as responsible for a responsible society as the government and also academia. And in my book, a responsible society is a society where people have a job, they can pay a decent roof over their head, put food on the table, make sure that their kids can go to school. Every child can go to school. There's medical care and there's safety. Digital safety, physical safety, climate safety. This is a responsible company. And you know, I'm pretty sure that our employees are better employees when they don't need to worry about those things. So, and this is where I think industry and business needs to take their responsibility. And they need to reach out to governments and academia to make that happen. Because we have the right academia and we have the right companies still. And on the academia, still I hear when we talk about the collaboration models that there is a concern at the academia that the scientific integrity is impeded because of the collaboration with business. I don't think that's true. If we look at these major societal challenges, we need every cornerstone, we need every building block. And I know our company works together pretty closely with this university, and I'm pretty sure that scientific integrity is safeguarded. Now my last point, complacency. I think when we look at our society, I sometimes have the feeling that we're fat, dumb, and happy. Things change in a more rapid pace than we realize. We need to step up, and we need to make sure that what we have, we use to the maximum benefit to keep building that and keep that responsible society. Because if we don't do that, and the value moves to other parts of the world, guess what's going to happen? Innovation. That's important, critical. And I think we should go away from terms like industrial policy. Let's do away with that. Let's talk about innovation policy. And my last point is, I will say, listen, we're well positioned to do this because the bigger the problem, the bigger the innovation. Thank you very much.
So we have about 30 seconds for this panel discussion.
Okay.
Joking, of course. Let me start with Diederik. I've loads of questions for you. I have 2, but I have about 10 more in my head, but I don't have time to ask them all. So I'll ask what's on the card and we'll see what comes out after that. To what extent is Europe's climate policy, such as the Fit for 55, an accelerator for the earning power here in Europe and perhaps even further afield?
I think it's instrumental. If we wouldn't do it, and actually it was shown 1.5 years ago, when we all woke up from sleepwalking ourselves into an overdependency of one fossil fuel delivered by one supplier who was an adversary all the time and an enemy right now. The only way we could escape from that, barely by the way, but we did, was because we had the Fit for 55 in place. If we had had the Fit for 55 program 10 years earlier, we wouldn't have bothered about this issue of Russian gas in February 2022 when he invaded Ukraine. So I argue that for climate change reasons, but also for strategic autonomy reasons, to be more independent from others in the world, we need to speed up the decarbonization of our economy and therefore the energy transition.
Thank you very much for the answer to the question. I'm going to move on to Marieke Blom now. You spoke about winners and losers in this transition. Do you think that governments in general should proactively support the winners and then proactively phase out the losers?
In corporate winners, you mean then, and corporate losers?
Let's look at corporate winners and corporate losers, yes.
Yeah, I think that's probably the better approach for governments to more sort of like be ready to support the possible winners. What I see is a bit of a risk currently when I hear politicians discuss either in public or behind closed doors, that they listen very, very much to existing players, and we have a very energy intensive part of the economy currently still, even if it's only 10%, it's still there. And I think the risk which is inherent in any political decision making is that the vested interests have the loudest voice on the table. So what I hope and what I always say to politicians is just sort of like be aware of the fact that 30 years ago you wouldn't have been on the table with ASML, for example, and now you need to sort of like just have the trust in something new that's coming before just listening to the vested interests. And
perhaps very quickly, can I ask you to look into your crystal ball?
Ooh, it works really bad for economics, you know.
yeah, I can imagine so, yeah. And I mean, this is a question perhaps that maybe a fog in the crystal ball. Could you perhaps speculate on what certain companies could be deemed as being winners and losers, or losers in this?
I think that's exactly the thing. You kind of, the risk is that you're going to be completely wrong. So I'm not saying to governments pick the winners, but I'm just saying to governments, be a bit careful in how you listen to those corporates who risk being the losers.
Peter, I see you want to say something.
Yeah, I think, if you look at the top 10 most valuable companies on the planet today and compare it with 20 years ago, they're all different. So I think it's extremely difficult to actually do that. But one thing is common, they're very innovative. They actually are continuously focusing on R&D and what needs are. How do you create value? So I think it's very difficult to say who are the winners and who are the losers. It's all about innovation.
Yeah. Which means you lay the groundwork, education, all these things, infrastructure, and there you trust on corporates to make it work.
Diederik, would you like to contribute to this particular question?
Well, I think theoretically you're right. As a government, you're very awfully positioned to choose winners and losers. But unfortunately, we don't have that time anymore to let 1,000 flowers flourish and see whatever comes up. We are in a hurry as a society, as a planet. So I do think we are obliged to listen a bit more to Mariike's plea to indeed look at society as a whole and decide as a society, it's still democratically decided, what we want as industry in the future and what we don't want as industry in the future. And some very harsh decisions will be the consequence of that discussion.
Now, Diederik, you mentioned the US and China. Peter, you also mentioned the US and China in what you were speaking about here today. Are you optimistic, and this is for all of you, I'll turn to Peter first, that Europe can be competitive in the face of what could be seen as their gargantuans that are Europe and the US? Yep. And could we perhaps then see a renaissance in the transition here?
Oh, I think we can be competitive. The question is whether we will be. So I think we have all the ingredients. But I think it's what Diederik says, we have no time. I think we need to organize ourselves much, much better around these big themes, about these big challenges. The bigger the problem, the bigger the innovation. Yeah? And just make our choices, make the priorities. This is what we need to do from a systemic point of view, system approach, not individual point solutions, but how are they connected to finally come up with the answer that actually addresses the big problem. Yeah? We have the ingredients, we have the building blocks, but we need to have a government that is, in that sense, facilitating. Yeah? And the government cannot come up with a solution, but the combination of governments as the facilitator. It's not only money, like I said, it is regulation, it is creating common platforms whereby they incentivize the academia and business to work together to address those challenges. It has to happen now. Because what happens in East Asia, not the Southeast Asia, East Asia, Japan, Korea, China, Taiwan, It's just, it goes at this incredible speed. Of all the money spent on the planet for renewable energy, China spends 50%. Yeah? China is the biggest producer of EV, electrical vehicles. They have the best battery technology. They're not going to stop. Yeah? And we will drive Chinese cars. Why? Because they actually give us what we need. They give us the value. So we need to sit together and say we have all the ingredients. So we can. The question is whether we will.
Marieke.
Slightly different view. I think there's a bit of a risk of a subsidies race between all these different blocks. And I'm still going to be the economist then and say, yes, subsidies when it comes to households I embrace, but if you look at the corporate subsidies, I mean, let's be thankful for the fact that China brought us cheap EV, cheap solar power, and the IRA, for example, is also going to make all sorts of inventions cheaper, and we should thank the American taxpayer for paying that for us. And be careful not to overdo it on the subsidies because they are still very inefficient. So I don't just see it as a race, it's also something that we can benefit from.
But it's going to happen. We're going to be inefficient by definition. And I'm biased, but the geopolitical situation is such that deglobalization has started. It's irreversible because of these big issues. And everybody sees, every geopolitical bloc, a socio-economic bloc, sees the challenges. And they will go for the maximum value. And they will do it no matter what. And I agree with you. It's going to be less innovative. It's going to be less efficient. Yeah, so it'll be a higher cost. It's going to be inflationary. Instead of globalization gave us deflation. Huh? Mm-hmm. And that's going to change. Yeah? So how are we going to compete in that environment? But just being smarter. We have to start working together closer now.
Let me conclude by coming back to Diederik, because I know you want to say something on this as well.
Well, it's interesting because listening to Marieke, I have a few brilliant economists in my team who also do exactly the same as you did, lean backwards and say, well, the US is going to make electrical cars on US taxpayers'
Yes.
money cheaper for European consumers. It can only be good for everyone as a planet. But it doesn't feel right. And I do think, and Europe has, I've watched this development with awe, by the way, because it's significant and fast. Europe has developed from this sort of naivete of we are all part of a happy, globalized traders world in which articles are made at the best possible place on the planet and then shipped to Europe for our consumption. We have developed from that naivete into, hey, listen, we need to take care of our own business, literally. So we need to make some of that stuff at home for many reasons, one of them being that you don't want to be too dependent. COVID learned us that lesson, and the war learns us that triple times. So, but I do also think that the development the trend of deglobalization is not irreversible. It is reversible, but while it's happening, and you can't deny the fact that it's happening, while it's happening, you need to step up to the plate and deliver for your citizens. And therefore, indeed, in the current time frame, Europe is delivering for its citizens by being a little less efficient, by contributing more subsidies than actually is responsible for economic reasons, but we're delivering for our citizens. Meanwhile, Europe has a job to try and counter the trend of deglobalization, because if that goes, if that accelerates, we are in big trouble. Yeah. We can only save this planet for future generations, not if we just work together as Europeans, but if we work together as a planet. So the next COP, the UNFCCC conference of the parties in Dubai, is going to be instrumental to keep some of that global cooperation together. I hope we can. I'm a little worried we can't. I'm still optimistic enough to at least go there and do my best.
Well, I'm going to interrupt. I would love to continue this discussion. We could be here, I think, for another hour. I'm looking at Robert Jan, and he's probably, please continue, right? But, and all our audience here as well, I'm sure. But we are stuck for time. So I would like everyone, please, to give a very warm round of applause to our speakers. Diederik Samsom, Marieke Blom, Peter Wennink. And I will let our speakers take their seats before I move on to the next component. A very interesting discussion. I think everyone will agree. Afterwards, I'm going to make sure that I'm around the speakers to hear what they're going to be speaking about. Right, let's move on to the next component of our program. And we are going to take a little bit of a video interlude. And we're going to watch a video in relation to some of the TUE startups and how they are seeking to help the energy transition.
Wij zijn altijd op zoek naar oplossingen voor de toekomst. Vanuit de TUE ontstaan elk jaar meerdere start-ups die zich hiermee bezighouden.
Op dit moment gebruiken we veel te veel fossiele energie in de industrie.
Industrieën zijn wereldwijd verantwoordelijk voor 40% van de CO2-uitstoot.
Het duurt veel te lang om van het gas af te gaan, waardoor we de klimaatdoelen in 2050 missen.
Bouwmachines en landbouwmachines veroorzaken enorm veel uitstoot.
Wat uiteindelijk op termijn mega grote problemen veroorzaakt.
Met deze technologieën maken onze start-ups het verschil.
Ja, in de toekomst willen we dat we cruciale dingen in onze wereld, dat we dat kunnen doen zonder dat we daar enige uitstoot bij genereren. En daar is elektrificatie cruciaal voor, denken wij.
Onze oplossing is een hydrogeneaggregaat in combinatie met een batterij of alleen een batterij. Wij hopen uiteindelijk alle dieselaggregaten en alle diesel aangedreven voertuigen op de bouwplaats en op festivalterreinen te verbannen eigenlijk, door een beter alternatief.
Celsius introduceert een warmtebatterijtechnologie op grond van water en zout, waarmee we heel snel een enorme hoeveelheid restwarmte kunnen ontsluiten voor het verwarmen van miljoenen gebouwen en woningen. En dat doen we met technologie die snel, groen en goedkoop is.
Met onze ijzerbrandstoftechnologie zorgen we ervoor dat industrieën wel kunnen verduurzamen. Uiteindelijk is onze doelstelling 1 gigaton CO2 te besparen per jaar in 2050. Dat is 7 keer de Nederlandse uitstoot, compleet bij elkaar.
Op onze universiteit geven we studenten en wetenschappers de kans om het verschil te maken.
TUE ademt innovatie uit. En op grond daarvan worden heel veel jonge en oude talenten geïnspireerd.
We zijn eigenlijk tijdens onze tijd als student op de TU zijn we altijd bezig geweest met eigenlijk de oplossing van morgen. En daar is natuurlijk de energietransitie cruciaal in.
De kracht van de TUE zit hem in zijn origine. De Technische Universiteit Eindhoven is opgericht in samenwerking met het bedrijfsleven.
De TU is echt onze springplank geweest. Dus we hebben onze opleiding daar mogen genieten, mega veel geleerd. Ja, de naam TUE, dat is wel een begrip.
And welcome back, everybody. We're on to our second panel discussion. We've added a chair to the chairs behind me. And of course, before we have a panel discussion, I need to bring a panel up on stage. So let's invite our panel speakers. And they are Helen van der Plas, CEO of Benelux Signify, Lars Reker, CTO and EVP NXP, Robert Jan Smits, President of TUE, and Lisanne Havinga, Assistant Professor in the Department of Built Environment here at TUE and also in the Institute Iris. A warm round of applause to our panelists, please. Very good, nice and orderly. That's the way it always makes it easy for everybody. Right, did you enjoy the discussion, by the way, we just had?
Oh, I'm so keen to react to Diederik.
That's definitely a discussion I want to hear as well later on, right? Let's start off with Helen. We've heard from our speakers about the future earning power of the Netherlands and Europe, and in this context, special attention has been paid to the impact of Europe's climate policy. Is this policy an accelerator for innovation, in your opinion?
Yes, it is. But I think we should also not only look at new innovation, new technologies, but also on technology we already have. At Signify, we are working a lot with the students of TUE and also different universities. A lot is being done, but not always used. So if you look at electricity consumption, 12% still goes to lighting globally. And that's still worth 5% of all CO2 emissions. If you compare that to aviation, for example, the sector, that's only 2%. So there's still a lot to do in which a lot of savings can be reached. And for that, we can use a lot, whether it's on the net congestion or somewhere else. So I think a lot of innovation can be fueled by freeing up electricity by doing already what's there. And for me, the concern is, and also looking back at the earlier discussion, there's so much more we can do, but let's please look integrally that we fuel economy by saving a lot of energy as well.
So thinking about the policies that are there, reflecting specifically on Fit for 55, is Signify Fit for 55?
Yes, we are. Of course, with all limitations we still don't know. I mean, that's also what makes it very exciting. I think if we look at how we build our strategy, we really on purposely put the strategy around sustainability at the heart of our overall business strategy. So if we look, and that's not only for our benefit, because if I look at the old technology, that was a recurrent business that we could live for years and years. If you need to replace a light bulb, as an easy example, that's easy. Now with LED lighting, it remains there for 20 years. So what's going to be our business model? That's our exercise. But if we know that by just changing over to that more sustainable solution, you can annually save in Europe 65 billion of electricity cost. That's also the taxpayer if we discuss it. It's also more than 50 million tons of CO2 emissions. That's the same as 500 coal mines that you put in practice. And if you look at the grid then, because we're all fighting for the grid, especially in this important Brainport region, we can do 47 million of heat pumps at that same use of electricity. So we trust it. We think we should speed up, and I know it's going to be, but not at the cost of the economy. So we can do it in parallel. So my plea again would be, please look at it simultaneously, and we can.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll come back to you again in a few moments.
Bye.
Lars from NXP, Lars Raker, how do you see the role of the chip manufacturing in Europe's new earning capacity future?
Well, very bright, I have to say, because I mean, everything what I've heard so far is, of course, should we slow down or should we speed up? And this is for the transition in society, but not for innovation. We have to speed up for innovation as much as we can. I mean, what Peter said prior, a lot of all these changes, everything that we have heard. I mean, 100 years ago, 140 years ago, Maybach and Daimler, they put a combustion engine in a horse carriage. These type of things, all this mechanical engineering, moved over 95% of all our innovation today in industrial, smart home, automotive, so in everything around us, is 95% is electronics based and software on top. So with that, of course, the semiconductor industry has an enormous focus in the meantime. In the meantime, we are discussing strategic supply chains and what can we do in Europe to stay resilient, what can we do to capture value, to capture innovation. And you have seen maybe a couple of the announcements in the press over the last month. The European main countries, I would say, have tried to partner up for a research roadmap, for a development roadmap, and for a manufacturing roadmap. And only the entire bouquet of the three makes, of course, a difference. So we need to stay ahead of the wave. We need to be more innovative than anyone else on the planet, because otherwise that does not pay our food. And we also need to not sell ourselves short. I mean, with all the pitches that I've heard prior here, I was thinking, oh, my 20-year-old son, should I advise him to go study in China or in the US? No. We have lead markets in automotive, in smart home, in smart industries, in security, in functional safety, and in AI for all of that, not for the big databases. And the basic below all of that is chips from, and now listen, is chips from NXP, Infineon, ST Microelectronics, or Bosch. Europe, and Europe. And that is the vast majority, and he is providing the materials and especially the equipment to produce all of that. So the Netherlands are center stage for all of that. So long story, very, very short. Innovation happens here if, as Peter said, if we only have the body tension, if we are not too complacent, we can do it. Let's do it. And it's by far better than always debating on which technology might pull us out of the trough. We have to do that ourselves.
And similarly, a question I just asked Helen, is NXP fit for 55?
Yes, so absolutely. And I mean, the key point also is any transition in the modern world, so the world that anticipates and automates, or the world that gets energy efficient, is in the vast majority based on semiconductors, smart electronics, and devices that think ahead of you as a user. And for all of that, that is the claim to fame of us, for example, in the stock markets. This is why the share price is behaving nicely. But of course, this is a bet on the future that we can be these innovators. And for that, we need really loads. We need loads of smart brains. And we have to do one thing, and this is for all the students here in the audience. We need to close this lab to fab chasm, as I would call it. There is one disease that we have in Europe. The smartest ideas, then we don't industrialize them, and the others manufacture them. Look at batteries, look at MP3 players, look at all these type of innovations over the last 30, 40 years. I've driven here this morning from Hamburg to Eindhoven because Robert Jan and myself, we are on a mission to close this lab to fab chasm, to really make sure that we, nerds from industry, can at least bring our opinion, and academia can either punch me on the nose or accelerate me and say, hey Lars, this is exactly what we want to do. This is how we want to jointly have relevant, and I think Jeroen in the video said it, relevant innovation for society. And if you are relevant, I give you my money, you are rich, and you can pay the roof above you, and you have a wealthy Brainport region. That's simple, and the long story very short, common denominator, speed of innovation helps.
Well, I have a follow-up question for the both of you. I'm going to come back to it at the end, but I'd like to move on to Robert Jan Smits. We've seen and spoken about a lot of puzzle pieces here today. Energy transition, creating earning power, and policies such as, for example, Fit for 55. What do you see as the role of universities such as TUE in developing earning power and bringing all these puzzle pieces together for the Netherlands and Europe?
Well, I think first of all, to stimulate debate, and listening to Diederik and his presentation, he stimulated debate. And I first would like to react a little bit to that, because that's only fair. First of all, Diederik, thanks for being here and for addressing me so eloquently. I think he did not read my interview at the Telegraaf that well, probably because it's not his favorite newspaper, so he probably immediately put it aside. But if he would have read it carefully, he would have seen that I don't say that we have to slow down the energy transition. I wanted to speed up, but only when the infrastructure is there. At the moment, as you know, 6,000 companies are waiting for a connection to the electricity net because of net congestion. People who have with all conviction to contribute to the greening put solar panels on their roof, they have to pay 20 euros now per month to get rid of the energy. So the infrastructure is not there at the moment, which causes huge problems. Furthermore, we have an enormous shortage of labor. If you look at the moment, 28,000 people will be needed to put the solar panels and to put the charging systems along the roads, and these people are not there, and yet we're rushing through. And what I fear, that if we continue with that pace without having the infrastructure in place, we will have a huge deindustrialization like we see at the moment in Germany. In Germany last year, there was a disinvestment of 124 billion. Companies go outside Germany instead of they invest in Germany. If you look in Germany at the moment, the percentage of, say, in the export, the earning power of Germany of the manufacturing industry is going down from 30% to 20%. The car industry in Germany, in which 800,000 people work and 1.4 million people are responsible, is really facing huge challenges. So in other words, we have to be extremely careful that we do not accelerate for the sake of accelerating, and we all want that if we have not the infrastructure in place. And I want the political parties to be honest about it, certainly with the elections in the Netherlands coming up. If we rush through, what are the consequences? What are the consequences? I think the consequences will be that we have a huge deindustrialization, and secondly, that the people who are not having the highest income and who just bought a little house, they have, according to the plans of Mr. Samsom, to invest 40,000 to get their house off the gas. They can't go for their twice per year trips to Benidorm anymore, and if they buy an electric car, they have no money for. Well, good luck in getting these voters in the elections for your party, Mr. Samsom. So this is my reaction, and that's why I think, coming back now to your question, Diederik,
yes, I'm happy you're coming back to my question.
What is the role of the university?
Yes, yes.
I think, first of all, to stimulate debate. And that's something which we do here fantastically, and I hope that constantly we can have this debate, and we don't agree on everything as long as we have respectful discussions and have a challenging debate with each other. But of course the first role of the university is to educate engineers who make the difference, because for the transitions, whether it's the climate transition, the energy transition, or you name it, engineers will be needed to provide the solutions. Secondly, we need to do research on the most innovative concepts to develop those solutions. And we just heard a couple of examples of our beautiful startups who are working day and night to indeed help to facilitate the energy transition. And I can only be extremely proud of these people who generated these companies and do an amazing work. And yes, that is a part which we want to accelerate and must accelerate, as all of you are saying. Innovation must be accelerated, and the government has to be much more risky there, providing subsidies, support to these companies. Because do you know, for 2 of these companies, we had to ensure money from the United States to get them off the ground. And that's, of course, not something you would like to see. And then I think our third role, besides the debate, is to provide scientific support to policymaking. And Lisanne, you're doing that, Helene de Koning is doing that, the ones who read the Financieel Dagblad today on the first page. So there's another professor from this university, Pauls, who is providing that is providing scientific support to policymaking, so that policymakers in The Hague can indeed take the right decisions. And that includes, of course, the party of Mr. Samsom as well.
I will at this moment invite Lisanne perhaps to react to Robert Jan's answer, and then I have a question for you as well. So please, because I can see the expression on your face changing quite a lot as the answer was being delivered. So please, what would you like to contribute in relation to this?
Yeah, well, I think it was the same week of the article that the Top Sector Energy published 100 innovations to help with congestion. So I think there are many solutions to the congestion that we experience in the grid, and I think the call to the government to drastically change the role of the district system operators and to really start working on congestion as a key priority, and that they have to anticipate already much more investments in the grid than they have been doing in the last decades. It's pretty insane that these haven't been done. But I think to have a debate like this, and I think you opened the opening of the academic year with the question on everyone's mind being what will be our future earning power. And I think the question on many, maybe the younger generation's minds will not be this, but will be what will our future be like? What will the future of our future generations be like? I recently became a mother. What will my daughter experience? And if you think about the consequence of climate change, I think it's incredible that we haven't really mentioned them here yet. But what will an economy be like if we have billions of people living in areas that have become uninhabitable, billions of refugees? And that's what we're heading towards. That's just one impact. There are many more impacts, a future without coral reefs and the ecosystems of the oceans collapsing. What will that economy be like? I think starting from that, there is no question whether we need to accelerate or slow down. We definitely have to accelerate, and the pace within 5 years, we have met 1.5 degree warming at this rate. So we are hurtling towards many more degrees warming, or many more, currently 2.5, if we meet the current targets. So if we're talking about delaying those targets or not meeting them, then we are heading towards more than 2.5. So just having said that first, I think... Oh. And also, I think when I talk about my field, the built environment, we have barely started the transition. I think in the interview you mentioned we are transitioning away from the gas too quickly. If you look at the neighborhoods in the Netherlands, we are currently doing a few pilots, a few experiments in a few neighborhoods. There have barely been, maybe a few hundreds of buildings have been cut off from the gas. That's it.
You know how many we have to?
Exactly. As part of the climate agreement, we were talking about going from 1,000 dwellings a year that have to be sustainably renovated to 1,000 a day. So that's talking about future green innovation and green industry that will flourish. It's more than 350x of the renovation market, which Dutch farmers actually can play a role in if they produce bio-based materials. So that's the BBB should put that in there. But that's just one, just one example. But that's my first reaction to this discussion.
Well, I'm happy that you also brought it back in towards the household, because we heard Marieke Blom talk about subsidies at the residential level and moving away from the fossil fuels or from the gas reliance. Yeah. And we've mentioned that there are pilots there available and there are subsidies there as well. Is that going to be enough to change? And can we change all these city districts on time? Because we're talking about time. So I'll let Lisanne answer it and then I'll come to you, Robert Jan.
Yeah, I think Robert Jan just mentioned the 40,000 euros per household that have to be invested, and I think the expenses of the transition are often highlighted, but I think it was Marieke Blom who also highlighted doing nothing is often more expensive, and I think the same is true for households. Many of these, we need massive investments, that's clear, but many of these investments have a good return on investment, and not only in terms of cost, but also in terms of indoor health, in terms of comfort, in terms of solving energy poverty. When it comes to that challenge, I think Diederik Jan just, Diederik Jan, that's Robert Jan. We just talked about what needs to happen to make this work, and I think, well, he said you need someone to ring the doorbell of every household and to tell them you are going to pay less and you don't have to invest anything, and I will make your house more sustainable and arrange everything for you. Now, of course, we are not in that market yet, but we have gotten to that market with solar panels. This is a perfectly professionalized market. Everybody is ringing my doorbell asking to put solar panels on my roof all of the time. And we need to get to that market when it comes to renovation, sustainable renovation of houses as well. And I think we are slowly getting there. When it comes to cavity insulation, we are already there. But when it comes to the more complicated and labor-intensive, that's also an issue, more labor-intensive solutions, there's still a lot of innovation that needs to happen. Yeah.
Robert Jan, you'd like to contribute as well?
I think we all agree that we want as quickly as possible to have the energy transition and that we need to respect the targets, of course, of 2050. The only thing I'm saying that with regard to 2030, Fit for 55, let's be very careful that we are not, as a result of rushing through, doing damage to our economy. And if we want to do that, and there's nothing against that certain parties in the elections want to do that, be clear about it. Be clear about it. You say, listen, we would like to close Tata Steel, or we will do this and that. Be clear and honest about it. Then we know at what party we should vote and not vote.
So let me ask all of you as a final question, each individually, for an answer to this question. Are you optimistic individually, speaking perhaps personally, or on behalf of the companies, university, or interacting with society, that we can do it? Can we do this in a timely manner? Helen?
Always. I think, though, that there are two topics that we haven't touched upon that I would love to give the challenge towards the students, maybe for this year. We're doing a lot also in co-creation again there, but it's on food availability and food security. That's also high-tech. We can do so much. So I'd love us to go to the next level. We're doing a lot of research already. And the second is on circularity, because that will also solve a couple of the problems we just touched upon. We have now found together again with the different parties to do that, have our first products that maybe were put in the market 6-7 years ago, because the supply chain is the problem there to really make that circular, have now been able to put that back. So I would love, with partner, was that my cue? The partnership to maybe see with all the bright and beautiful companies here, also on high tech, because also I saw VDL, also on food, there's a lot we can still do. High tech is there. I think we have not touched upon that enough. Time is also too
There's
short.
a lot of things we haven't touched upon here today,
so
for sure.
food itself is a critical next point in innovation.
Lars, NXP's point of view, or your own personal point of view?
My very personal one. When I was a young boy, my grandfather passed away because he was already very old. So he was born in 1897, and I'm born 1970, so you can start calculating. Now, I was doing a keynote speech for one university discussion some years ago, and I was just thinking back of what has my grandfather experienced in life. He was living in a farm close to the Dutch border in the Münsterland here, so very basic. This man had seen the upcoming times of from steam engine and horses to cars, to zeppelins, to planes. In his lifetime, someone had been on the moon. There was TV, color TV, telephones, mobile phones, computers, heart transplants, penicillin. I mean, you know better than I what I'm talking about here. And every 15 years, I'm not talking about 2 world wars, but every 15 years there was a major, mega, huge disruption, including atomic bombs and so on, where everyone was thinking, world is going to end. Nonsense. Just because someone invented the internet and we are connected now and we can order pizza online, we think that we live in disruptive times. No, the industries are changing. We had a couple of industrial revolutions, but the quality of life today of me and my kids was the ones of the royal families, if at all, 50, 60 years ago, not 200 years ago. So with all of that, I mean, how can you all not be optimistic? I mean, get to your pencils or PCs or mobile phones or programming desks, program and innovate what you can. And we here, we have another 2 hours of debate how we transition the country. The Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, France, whatsoever, all impossible. Believe me, in 15 years it's done. If you innovate and if we get our body tension, as Peter said, we only have to fight one thing, and that is complacency. Keep the spirit in our brains and the innovation focus. That is here the opening of the academic year. And in 5 years, I want to see you all of your CVs at NXP on the desk with a lot of patents. Yeah, that's the only challenge that I have here. So in other words, how couldn't I be optimistic? Yeah.
Very good, Robert Jan. Very quickly.
Well, looking at the brilliant young people we have at this university, how can you not be optimistic? I mean, if I look here at the students and our staff, I'm full optimistic. I want to go as fast as possible. I want to go to 230 targets and 250, but not in a Chinese car.
Lisanne, for the final word from the panel discussion.
Thank you so much. Yeah, there was just a quote by Peter who said, I'm optimistic, but I worry a lot. And I think that combination is very important. And I think talking about topics that haven't been addressed yet, we have talked a lot about subsidies, but I have not yet heard the famous words of fossil fuel subsidies. I almost don't dare to pronounce them anymore. But yes, I think the incentives should be created to promote green innovation and green growth, and therefore we should also deter and not put the incentives in places where there are still fossil fuels and there's the, like, I'm a vegetarian, for example. The meat industry gets far more subsidies than their vegetarian alternatives. That's just one sector, there are many more. I will be hopeful when I see that changing, and I'm at that, we are not there yet, so I'm hoping to see that change in the very near future.
Thank you very much to my panel, our panel. Well, we had a very nice discussion. I think we could have spoken again for another hour. A round of applause, please, for the panel. Wow. Get seated. Now, you may have noticed something a little bit unusual on stage. If you look to my left, over in the very corner, there is something that's been there. That's the thing I've been making reference to. And I think we should find out what exactly that is. So here is a short video to explain exactly what that thing in the corner is.
Over the past few years, Eindhoven University of Technology has put sustainability as a higher priority. They've already taken some steps to implement this, but we understand that it is hard to put words into action, as sustainability is a broad topic that reaches all corners of our university. This is why we created an encouragement and reminder at the decision-making table, the chair of the future. It represents the sustainable future we all want to work towards.
In order to show the balance between the three aspects of sustainability, environment, economic and social, we created the chair with 3 different materials based on these aspects. So the first material is created with recycled plastic that is generated in our day-to-day life. The second material is mycelium, which are the roots of fungi, and this creates a network for nutrition and communication. And the third material is made with seaweed and green waste, and this is a compostable material made from renewable sources. Therefore, we combine the materials and the shape in a way that's inspired by the TUE campus, and we hope that in future decisions, the sustainable future is taken into account. Let the chair of the future
be a reminder for a sustainable future, and give it a permanent seat
at the decision-making table.
Well, here it is, the chair of the future. And I was actually touching it earlier on. It's very spongy, very, very nice. I'm sure it's very comfortable to sit on, although we'll get into how long you could sit on that later on, perhaps. I'm not taking this home. I wish I was, because it's very, very nice. But before we find out where exactly this is actually going to go, let us hear a little bit more about the Chair of the Future. And to tell us a little bit more about the Chair of the Future, I'd like to invite on stage Koen de Nooy and Michael Heine. I'll get you both to come in a little bit closer to the chair, so we're all here. Right, this is fantastic. It really is very nice, very well done. Would you like to tell everyone in the room a little bit more about this particular chair?
Of course. So thank you for having us here on the stage. As you just saw in the video, we've been working very hard with our team to design the whole Chair of the Future, and we're very keen to finally present it to the TUE today. We first want to thank the many organizations, students and staff of the TUE community that have supported our initiative and stand behind our message here today. And we want to give a special thanks to the very talented students that designed the whole chair. So I want to ask Leo, Margot, Luc, Vanessa, Isa, Hannah and Pauline to please stand up, and everyone give them a big round of applause. So if you want to know more about the whole design process or the different materials we have been using, please ask any one of them at the drinks right after the opening. As we stand on the brink of an uncertain future, the need for a fundamental change in our thinking has never been more apparent. We're living in an age with unparalleled challenges, from climate change to social inequality to economic instability. And as we face these daunting issues, it is our obligation to take responsibility and contribute to a truly sustainable future. Our university is uniquely positioned in the intersection between education, research, industry and society, and has the power for positive change. And as a community, we recognize the important steps that we've already been taking. But we cannot sit still and pat ourselves on the back, as there's much more that needs to be done. With the TUE-wide vision on sustainability right around the corner, we must more often reflect on the impact our decisions have on the future and strive to find a better balance between economic, social and environmental aspects.
So whether you are a leader of a service, a department, a research group, a study program, or even the entire university, the sustainable future that we all want to work towards deserves to have a permanent seat at your decision-making table. And for this, we made the chair as a constant reminder and encouragement. But as you might have heard, the question is asked, can we achieve all this in the set time frame? Let's rephrase this question to how can we achieve all this in the set time frame? Of course, we must be pragmatic, but we should never forget that we are surrounded by many of the most driven and smartest people in the world. And with that, we want to give this chair as a symbol to you, Robert-Jan, as part of the executive board, but also to all of you as leaders of Eindhoven University of Technology. In the coming months, we will collaborate with you to ensure a long-term impact of the chair and to find a better balance between well-being of people, health of our planet, and the economic viability of the decisions that we make every single day. Let the Chair of the Future, be a reminder for a sustainable future, and give it a permanent seat at the decision-making table. Thank you.
Well, I think it's quite clear I'm not taking this home. Because you've just, that's okay, but you've already indicated who it's going to, so I'd like to invite our President, Robert-Jan Smits, on stage to go through with the official awarding of it to the university. It's very nice, Robert-Jan, isn't it? It is very, very, very nice. What's your reaction to, when you see this, the Chair of the Future?
Well, I mean, it's not only the nice material I see, and also the story behind it, but the symbolism. to have this chair at our meetings, constantly think about future generations, constantly think about all kinds of elements you just mentioned in your presentation is fantastic. It's a very unique concept. It would be great if you have also a little chair for Diederik to bring home to Brussels.
Yes, we do.
You do, that's good. Good that you thought of that as well. No, just amazing, and I'm very grateful to the creativity and for these initiatives. Yeah, I'll give it a very good place in our executive board meeting room, and then on, I think, also pass it on to the dean so that in their meeting rooms they can also have it. So we make it we give it a tour.
So just to check, when can I expect to have this? Because if it's doing a tour, how many people does it have to go through?
Well, since we have far too many departments, it may take. You'll get one. You get your turn.
At some point, of course, I'm only teasing. It's a brilliant initiative. Congratulations to you on putting this together. A round of applause, please, for the representative of Chair of the Future and nobody else. We are now on to the final part of our program today, and it's an important part because it is the official opening of the academic year 2023-2024 here at TUE. And at this time, I would like to invite our Rector Magnificus, Sylvia Lenharts, to the stage.
Dear colleagues, dear partners, during the past decades, the world is changing faster, and especially during the last years, and with greater complexity. It was German writer and philosopher Philip Blom who stated it in terms of generations. It took 300 women generations to settle into cities. 3 generations ago, we got electricity, and during our lifetime, there was a digital revolution, with an enormous boom in knowledge, news, and culture. The changes that we are going through at technological, social, and individual level are going at warp speed. This places our society for challenges on the economical, social, and political level. But what does this mean for the university as a pillar and role model in society? Never has the role of our university been more important nor more challenging. The forces that act upon us are getting more complex and are coming faster and faster. The number and diversity of stakeholders, citizens, societal parties, companies that we as a university serve and rely on is increasing faster. The evolution into knowledge societies has put the universities at the epicenter of human creativity and learning, critical to our planet's surviving and thriving. Together with our partners in the Brainport area, we are the driver of value-driven change, where innovation happens. But how can we stay that driver of value-driven change, that source of innovation? First, I want to talk to you about people and the connection between people. We need people who have the mental flexibility to see the walls that we constructed and regard them as not as immutable, but as movable, even breakable. We need the students who are flexible, who get in-depth education, but also challenge-based learning. We will stimulate our students to do part of their education at one of our partner institutes in the 40U Eurotech or EU Alliance, the knowledge alliance between Eindhoven, Wageningen, Utrecht, and UMC. We would like to stimulate people to do what they like most, because that mostly coincides with what they're best at. We need the strong individual and the good team players. We need fundamental curiosity-driven research, and that remains fully recognized as an end in itself. We will put science, engineering, human-centered design and innovation as our trademarks. We will stimulate inter- and transdisciplinary cooperations with respect to their different outcomes and longer timeframes in academic rewards and promotion schemes. We will stimulate cognitive diversity because that leads to more enrichment and more impact. But what do we as TUE stand for? Our values underpin our culture and improve trust and respect to all parties in the campus community in the Brainport areas. But these values are often implicit, and that's why I would like to speak out on our values. First of all, we stand for autonomy and freedom. We are free to pursue and express our ideas. Second, we stand for care and collegiality. We care for each other. We show empathy. We are self-reflective. We look in the mirror. Third, we stand for equity, diversity, and inclusion. We ensure that all roles are open and accommodating for all, independent of gender, class, faith, religion, ethnicity, or whatever. Fourth, we stand for integrity and ethics. We will improve our reliability, honesty, respect, and accountability. Fifth, we stand for openness and transparency. We are as open as possible, as closed as necessary. Do what you say what you do. And last but not least, we stand for collaboration. We stimulate our people to collaborate with other parties outside of the university, in society, and with our partners at Fontis, Summa, and all relevant parties outside of this campus. With our people and our values as core, and thank you for the deans for giving me the term academic citizenship. That sounds all very nice, but more in depth, where would I like to focus on? I have 3 areas to focus on right now. I would like to reform academic careers. I would like to all people should be able to grow, not only researchers and educators, but also the support staff. We strive for parity of esteem between different career paths, including research, education, and valorization. There should be more flexibility to switch jobs between industry, academia, society, academia, and we will encourage and support sabbaticals to give people time to get to learn each other better. But remember, culture matters. We expect to respect our values. We want to get people out of their silos. Second, I want to focus on strengthened civic engagement. We will stimulate our people to spread our values outside of the university and the campus community, to participate in debates, in discussions, with respect for each other's opinions, to counter misinformation and falsehoods. We invite learners to become actively engaged in our projects, in our debates, to build bridges and foster understanding throughout society, because scientific support is badly needed for public policy making. Third, I want to develop full value chains in the Brainport area. By thinking outside in, working multidisciplinary, focusing and delivering, we can bridge the valley of death from lab to fab by specifically supporting people, infrastructures to deliver what they promise. We will support our institutes to deliver high-tech systems, high-tech materials, high-tech engineering, pilot lines, advanced materials, and energy solutions. We will show the world that our system approach of heterogeneous integration of hardware and software delivers prototypes and demonstrators for the manufacturing industry in the Brainport area and in the Netherlands. By providing infrastructure, facilities, coaches, We will support our valorization and research output, not only by IP-based spin-offs, but also by long-term strategic innovation and transition partnerships with companies and societal parties. Also, for the national semiconductor roadmap, we will look for partnerships to make a clear, strong position in the EU Chips Act. And for the students, together with UFlex, I would like to offer every student, every master student, the opportunity to get a side job in the city, in the region, in the Brainport area, because that is an important first step to build strong connections. So what is the role of our university in this ever faster changing world? It was one of our famous computer scientists and Professor Edsger Dijkstra who said, it's not the role of the university to give what society asks for, but to offer what society needs. I think in these times, we need to look beyond the issues of today and deliver what society of tomorrow needs. We are the driver of societal change where innovation happens. Our people and the connections between people are at the forefront. Our academic values and the power of cooperation are core. As TUE, we are a university without walls, open and engaged in society while strongly rooted in our core values. We educate those to whom the future belongs, we perform in-depth research, and we deliver value for society by our innovation and culture in service to society. It's not only science for science, but also science for society. And then I'm fully convinced that we will stay the pioneers that we already are, the drivers of an open community and warm culture where courage and hope flourish. Let's do it.
To ask you to step forward to the front of the stage just for a moment, because something has to be placed behind us. So I want to say thank you very much for those inspiring words to open the academic year here for 2023-2024. But we haven't officially opened things just yet, because something has been placed right behind me that needs to be pressed. And there's two people on the stage, and spoiler alert, I'm not the one who's pressing this. I wish I was, but I don't get the opportunity. So let's take a step back to the red button. It needs to be pressed. Are you ready,
Yes,
Rector, for the countdown?
Completely ready.
Excellent. So let's start the countdown from 5. And everybody, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And we are open for business. Yes, the new academic year is officially open here at TUE. We've had plenty of special guests today. I can't go through all of the affiliations, but I'm going to ask everyone for one round of applause to please thanks to Diederik Samsom, to Marieke Blom, Peter Wennink, Helen van der Plas, Lars Rieker, and Lisanne Hafinger, and of course Robert Jan Smits for being part of the panels. Wow. And of course, we have a brand new piece of furniture for the university, the Chair of the Future, which is behind me. So thank you as well to Koen and Michael for coming on stage and awarding that. So I have been your host, Barry Fitzgerald. I wish everyone on the TUE campus the very best for the new academic year, and stay safe and stay healthy. Right. Before we all leave and enjoy the refreshments, I have a couple of things just to go through.